Hello, everybody, again. She Loves Tech is proud to be hosting this panel in partnership with IMDA and to celebrate the Singapore 100 Women in Tech. And every speaker on this panel has been named on the IMDA Singapore 100 Women in Tech. So, when it comes to building environments for creativity and innovation to thrive, I welcome these three female leaders. I was just reflecting sort of before this panel how unique they are and how off the beaten track they have taken their careers, which is why I was very excited to actually speak to them today. So, to introduce them very quickly, Karin, as you can see her astronaut outfit, is an astropreneur. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, it means someone who is working with space and technology. She is the CEO of Spaceport Sweden, an initiative to establish Europe's gateway for space travel, and is passionate about advancing humanity in space and using technology to empower communities on Earth. Secondly, we have Dr. Ayesha Khanna, CEO, co-founder of ADDO AI, an artificial intelligence solutions firm. She serves on the board of IMDA to drive Singapore's digital economy and power its smart nation vision. And last but not least, we have Xanne. Xanne is a serial entrepreneur, armed with over 16 years of experience in the financial services industry. She has now launched next-generation telco startup Gorilla Mobile that provides new dimension to the mobile communications experience. Gorilla is meant to disrupt the traditional telco market as the first service-on-demand model and is powered by blockchain. So, as a start, I want to throw this question to the panel. Creativity and innovation, DNA or conditioning? What do you think?
Look, for me, it's very much about conditioning. I'm a firm believer that you take, when I first went to the US, there was a lot of bias against Asians and the fact that Asians just do copycatting all the time. That was, the vibe, that we couldn't think for ourselves. And yet, when we went there, a lot of us, we began to be free to fail, to experiment, to tinker. So I think that when you create the right Petri dish for people to thrive in, then they become creative because it's natural for us to be creative as human beings. And it's really remarkable to see children, how they are very experimental and they tinker. And then over time, some of them, if they are straitjacketed into very academic or preset paths, they lose that ability. But I also work with a lot of teenagers, and once you re-expose them to that freedom, it really comes back. So I would vote for conditioning.
And just to say, Ayesha has a young daughter who's also very big on tech, and I think thanks to your conditioning for sure.
I think it's also conditioning and nurturing. I think the ability to be creative or innovative really lies in this. First, it starts from the spark of a sense of curiosity. So you gotta be curious about things, right? And you have to be asking the right questions. So I remember when I was in school, I had, those days people were called insurance agents. So these days they are called financial advisors. So I had the insurance agent telling me this thing. He said, you borrowed $50,000 to pay off your university school fees, right? And your dad put $50,000 and you pay 5% on it. And your dad put $50,000 in the fixed D and the bank pays him 1% for it. So essentially, you're just borrowing from your own father and then paying the bank 4% for it, right? So, so that is the right question to ask because that got me thinking about stuff. So I guess that is also a stem from like creativity or innovation because in that right environment where people are taught to think properly or in a design thinking manner, then it breeds that innovation or creativity or creation to solve certain problems that we may see that is not so obvious. Like, why would I want to pay the bank 4% to borrow from my own father. I know it's not so simplistic, but I'm just using that as an example of that sort of thinking.
And Karin, I'm assuming you're going to say no, it is all about DNA to be an entrepreneur. Yeah?
Yeah, no, I totally agree, you know, with the panelists here. It's absolutely about conditioning. You know, when we first started out, so as you mentioned, you know, we want to establish a gateway for human space travel in Europe and in Sweden. And much of what we want to do is undone. You know, it hasn't been done before, or it's only been done in a government capacity. So we started out 15 years ago. We were probably, you know, 15 years too early. But we had to navigate the unknown all over, you know, again and again and again. And that takes creativity. You know, we would listen, we would learn, and then we would partner with a lot of stakeholders in our community, and we would develop new products and services that haven't been seen before or haven't, you know, been launched in that capacity. So I think it's very much, you know, surrounding yourself with that people that share your passion, but also might add to your weaknesses, you know, so you have a diverse team. And I think as you follow your passion and you do a lot of brainstorming, you know, you discuss, you listen, you learn, you know, that sparks creativity and innovation. And also, I think it's very much built on trust, you know, that you dare to ask questions and that you dare to fail. Because that creates a very innovative and stimulating environment. And I think everyone inherently has the great capability to be very, very creative.
Thank you. So I would like to get your views on what Singapore is like as an environment for female founders. I think this discussion will check if the efforts to supercharge our ecosystem has actually been successful. So, on that note, creating conditions for women to thrive, what does it take? What has your experience in Singapore been so far?
Well, I've had a great experience in Singapore far. I think it's been very embracing. I think there's a great ecosystem. You know, I've been able to be part of different communities. What I've been really impressed by is, you know, when Singapore decides to do something, you do it, you know. And I think the initiative, the Women in Tech initiative, and how the government has sort of pledged to make a difference to empower women, and that whole discussion and very hands-on initiative that's come from that. You know, that gives me a lot of hope. You know, I obviously come from Sweden, which is one of the most gender equal countries in the world, and we have also a really great startup system. But we still have, you know, gaps when it comes to including women in leadership positions or women in tech. So we're also seeing great initiatives like in Singapore. But I think where we have progressed, perhaps, is that you know, Sweden needs to and wants to attract a lot of global talent. You know, we want to attract startups, and we need global talent to help us build a bigger ecosystem and a bigger economy. And also trust. There is a high level of trust. There we see a great deal of intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship. And employees get a lot of autonomy in the workplace. And I think that builds trust, which also helps people to be perhaps less scared of failure. You know, it sort of fosters innovation. And also, I think it was Jacqueline that talked about this before, when it comes to policies around, not least, parental leave. You know, in Sweden, you're able to have up to 480 days of parental leave, and you can share this equal between men and women. And it's very often done so, perhaps not 50-50, but at least, you know, more men do actually take out parental leave. So, you know, I think we can learn from each other. And I think, you know, what the science that we're seeing and the efforts that are being made, I think, yeah, it gives me great hope for the future.
Ayesha, as a huge advocate for women in tech, what does it take for women to thrive?
Look, what I experienced was it's the government can do a lot, and you know, the media can do a lot. But when you really come down to working, what is the environment that is allowing you to be yourself? So when I came, I worked 12 years on Wall Street, and I came to Singapore, and I was told that by very well-meaning men that I was too direct, that I was aggressive, that I should tone down. And across Asia, to the extent that people on my team told me, your voice is too intense on the phone, and it scares the men. One man, I mean, and it's not, I'm really sweet. I mean, come on, you know? It's just that again and again, I kept hearing, and I'll tell you something, I started toning myself down to be more emotionally intelligent, to be more culturally emotionally intelligent, to the point that now I interviewed for a very large company for a particular advisory, and they said, we don't even believe that she's done what her bio says. She's very low-key. And by the way, this happened like 2 months ago. So just to let you know, there is something in the environment that needs to let women speak up. I have many male friends. I sit on many panels. They all tell me, yay, great. But the men I work with don't tell me that. When I go and sit across a table and advise clients, they don't give me that vibe. It's always, always, more often than not, that she's too strong, that she's appearing not. One man told me I wasn't ladylike enough. Like, literally. I mean, and this is at my age. So I'm looking at young women and thinking, is this the feedback they're getting in Asia? So how do we change it? We have women networks. So this is what I did. I stopped talking to men for a while. I started hanging out with the girls' club. And there's an amazing girls' club in Singapore and all over Asia. And I went, and I go to 1880 or not. Mark sees me there all the time. I'm having lunch with a woman almost every day. These are power women.
I would like to be invited. Please invite
I
me.
will. And you know what they told me? They said, be the force you're meant to be. You can do it. And they rebuilt my confidence. So we need to be there for each other, and we need to be loud. We need to have a voice, and if we make mistakes, that's okay. But I think in Asia, and especially if we go to Pakistan, to India, to Bangladesh, to Indonesia, I'm not sure we're letting women really speak up. And that comes from women having groups like this together and finding their voice and being confident in their voice and being confident in being strong. We're on that route, but we need to do more, especially for younger women.
Thank you, Ayesha. I think I spent quite a lot of time thinking about this, especially being a venture capitalist myself. I think the Girls Club is important, but I think increasingly, I think it's more about the power of mixed networks, and actually how do we have more men as our partners and our allies as well as strong female cheerleaders like yourself. My next question is for Xanne. Are there cultural shocks operating in the intersection of these three industries, which you are, the telco industry, the finance industry, and the blockchain industry, all usually quite male-dominated? How do you feel about being women in this space and doing something really quite revolutionary and quite brave?
I think it's definitely without a doubt that the telco space is very, very male-dominated, as well as the blockchain world. You hardly see any women in that space. I remember being invited to a telco event. There were less than 5 women in a group of 300 men.
But yet, Singapore's biggest telco, or the region's biggest telco, was actually led by a woman for a very long time.
Yes.
Interestingly.
Yeah, but I guess to maybe innovate or start up in this space, and especially being a woman, I have to agree to really quite a large extent what Ayesha just said. I think it's just something that you don't see on the surface, or it's just not, it's not out there, but you feel it when you're working. You feel it when you go to work, or you feel it when you raise a suggestion in the boardroom with people. And there's always that sort of label, right? Because when a man bangs the table, oh, he's assertive, he's driven, right? And then when a woman bangs the table, she's emotional, she's PMSing, and it's the same action, yeah? And it's the same point, but obviously you're just gonna get that sort of gender bias.
And how have you dealt with it? As in how have you actually addressed it? I mean, not the gender bias, but actually more like, how have you addressed navigating the challenges? Because navigating challenges takes more than banging tables, right? How have you done it in your unique way?
Yeah, actually I don't bang tables. It hurts me. Yeah, I mean, why would I want to spoil my nails and all that, right? So, yeah. Okay, so I think I just get on with the program, and I get on with the bros because I think to them I'm more like a bro, so they treat me like a bro, although I don't look like one. And because of the blockchain world, so I work with a lot of programmers and developers, and I speak their lingo, so we get that sort of common understanding. But I just want to share something. It's not really here in Singapore. It was really an experience that I felt really firsthand at London FinTech 2 years ago. I was there as a speaker, and then we had an exhibition booth. It was a FinTech and a blockchain event. So I was like standing maybe 5 meters from the booth, and then I see this group of men in suits walking towards my booth. So I went up to them and I said, "Hi, so how can I help you?" And they just walked right past me to my two colleagues. One is a German guy and one is a Spanish guy. They're very good-looking hunks. And then they walked past me and they went straight to them and say, "Hey, we're so interested in your tech. You know, like, can we find out like more about your technology?" And the two of them just looked at them and said, "You can talk about technology to our CEO right there, because we don't know about the technology." So they were so embarrassed because I could see it. And because when we're in London, you know, Asian look quite young, right? So I think I look very young, and I probably look like a receptionist. But this is real, right? So you face it on the ground. I'm not offended, so I just went up to them and I said hi. I introduced the tech. I told them how the tech works, what we actually do. But this is really just a thing that I think I'm just echoing a lot of what Ayesha said. But there's no way that you can do anything about it. You just get on with the program, right? And then you just get over it.
And after you presented the deck, how did their attitudes change towards you? How were their reactions?
Oh, okay. So interesting question, Virginia, because so usually when any events, right, or any meetings that I go to, I usually let the men go first because I'm Chinese and I'm taught that way. Yeah, I know. So yeah, it's kind of weird, but I usually let the men go first. And they will speak up all their comments, and then I will present like my solution or my suggestion. And that is when they realize, oh, I think she actually knows what she's talking about. Like, she's just not the pretty face in the room, you know? It's nice to be the pretty face in the room too. But I think it's really just that substance, probably. You really need to carry your worth. There's nothing wrong, and it's always that association, right? I mean, if you're in a dress, you probably don't know much about tech or engineering or stuff like that, but it's proven that it's not true by these two wonderful ladies beside me. So I guess we have to probably realistically work a lot harder than men to show that we have what we have, whereas the men probably don't need to do that much, or to have that louder voice, or to have that, to put in that sort of assertion. But we have to, just because maybe we just have that culture in Asia.
But the one thing else I noticed as well about your story is that you were very gracious about it. And I think, you know, that's something that I am noting in my head. I had a very powerful mentor in China. She was the first woman to lead a large listed technology company, one of the big ones. And she used to tell me that when she went to Japan, actually for meetings, she's a CFO at the time, now she's a CEO, they would assume she was the secretary. And so they wouldn't talk to her. And then when they introduced her as a CFO, who was going to lead the negotiations, everybody else was incredibly embarrassed. But this lady was essentially voted, I think, best CFO in China by institutional investor quite a number of times. But then when they realized that, then their attitudes changed. But I think we still have some way to sort of let go of those assumptions so that people don't make those assumptions in the first place, right? Yeah, just because you're a pretty face.
Yeah, I think we need more of us here to represent many more of us in the younger generation, so that then people will know that there are more of these people out there, right?
You know, the younger generation is really changing. Most of the interns and associates I have are like early 20s. And they're really teaching me a thing or two about how women and men are changing as well. For example, I used to think gaming is only really for guys and, minority, but the younger generation is telling me, Virgie, you're wrong. It's really 50-50, especially here in Asia. So things are changing. Some of the biggest influencers in gaming actually are women, earning even more. So, things are changing, but I take the point. But thank you for sharing that so honestly. It's much appreciated. My next question is for you, Karin. And being on quite an audacious path, and splitting your time between Europe and Singapore, I think many years ago I used to frequent Tel Aviv in Israel to study their startup nation DNA, and it was often said when people compared Singapore to Israel, Israel, they have what they call the chutzpah, the audacity or the daring to challenge and to change, and that Singapore lacked the DNA to be a successful ecosystem for tech startups because as Asians, we were not allowed to fail. What do you think about that? How were you brought up? And because you're doing something so audacious, is what is that fear? Do you have fear of failure? In achieving your vision? Yeah.
No, it's a very good question. I mean, first of all, I think in today's society, it's not enough to be adaptable to change. I think we need to dare to lead. We live in the fourth industrial revolution, and the only constant really is change. And for us to stay competitive, both as nation and as companies, I think we need to continuously innovate. And to be able to do that, you need to create the right environment. I mean, you need to have a diverse team. And you need to be able to foster a creative environment, again, built on trust, where your employees dare to fail and dare to, ask questions and can develop. The space industry used to be super risk averse. I mean, there was a mantra, failure is not an option. But now we're at the dawn of a new era where, both the public sector and private companies are driving that, the development so that we can increase the speed of innovation, so that more people have access to space and we can live and work in space. And that development is coming very much from new ventures. And it's coming from, new startups that can innovate at a more rapid speed. So now innovation is very much part of the equation. If you don't fail, you don't innovate. So of course, I have a dream of what I want to achieve, but I also know I have obstacles on the way, and I need to overcome them. But am I afraid of failure? No. As long as I fail forward, I learn from my failures, and I think this is an environment that we need to create. As community, as companies, and as nations, we need to foster an environment where people feel it's safe. It's safe to raise your voice or share your opinion, but also to make mistakes, because that is how you increase the speed of innovation and how you learn and how you develop and how you take the next giant leap forward.
Thank you for that. I remember many years ago when I first started my own entrepreneurial journey, I watched a video of a young Elon Musk back in like 2007, when Tesla was probably close to bankruptcy or whatever it is. And I remember being very inspired, he was talking about the ability to fail. He actually said, I felt like we had maximum less than 10% of success in terms of making Tesla a success. Yeah. But yet, I still felt that whatever we did, even if we failed, we would push forward the renewable electric car and renewable energy electric car industry anyway. So it's still worth doing. Is that how you feel about space?
Totally, absolutely. I think actually it's the reverse. I think there's a risk of hampering or dampening innovation by not daring to take risk and not daring to fail. So I think it can actually backlash if you don't allow that energy and spirit to flourish.
Yeah, I think we still have some way to go as traditional Asian culture. I'm going to tell my mother that when I go home tonight. But one final question for all three ladies. Do you believe, as women who are on pretty groundbreaking, trailblazing paths, do you think women, more than men, overthink before embarking on a path that is somewhat unknown and less well-trodden? Do you think, or what are your very unique personality traits, you think, that make you better suited for a career in technology and in entrepreneurship?
I think that men and women both overthink equally. But I do have to say that I think in this respect, I feel that the men does have a higher propensity to take on bigger business risks and financial risks than women. Generally speaking, they, even after overthinking and much apprehension, which women can do as well, they are the one that takes the bite. Whereas women tend to maybe not be so aggressive to be to risk. That's the first part of the question. So the second part of the question is I felt very lucky because I think that I am a generalist, and it's very hard. It's a little bit harder for a generalist to thrive in a traditional corporate world because the corporate world fancies the specialist more. So it's much easier if you're competent in one specific skill set to climb the corporate ladder. But I think in the startup world, the generalist has a much better chance of succeeding. In fact, I just came across this new term that I watched last night at Tech Talk. It's called multi-potentialite. There is this new term that is called multi-potentialite. So if you're someone who has like multiple interests and different pursuits, and you're able to do many different things at one time, then I think that the startup world or the tech world is perfect for you because there are actually really a lot of different spots and different types of role that needs to be filled in that will keep you busy. So I feel that being a generalist, so I do a bit of like that business, marketing, sales, programming, algorithm, design, blah, 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 fundraising, there's so much to do, right? Keeps me happy, and I thrive in that environment. So I think I'm lucky to be where I am.
Multi-potential.
Multi-potentialites. Yeah, I don't know. This
Multi-potentialites.
new word that just came up.
Love that. Yeah.
I have to 110% agree with you. You know, I think that what was great about my childhood, and which I'm very keen we should do in Singapore, is shatter this artificial glass wall between engineering and humanities. Actually, everything is a pursuit of you know, your curiosity, whether you are reading Dostoevsky or you're looking at computational algorithms. And the fact that I did both growing up, that I did both in college, and I continue to have an interest in both, is very, very important to me because it allows me to be, I think, less risk averse. The more you read about different you know, literature or films, you get a sense of like emotional nuance and that life is about highs and lows. And that has helped me a great deal because for me, you know, failure is just not a problem, basically. I don't consider failure anything, it's just a little pebble on the road. And that's what I teach my kids, and that's also a lot of what we talk about in the course, which is AI for Girls, that we run for girls in polytechnics in Singapore. But the key really is that you can't get that when you're so straitjacketed into one thing. Then everything that goes right or wrong in that particular discipline becomes a problem for you. Whereas if you have other interests, exactly as you said, you can always lean on something else to make you see it from another light and see it in a more positive light as well.
Absolutely.
Well, so I actually think that this is a bit of a stereotype. You know, I think men and women, you know, our brains, I mean, our brains are just phenomenal, right? And I think it's very much down to personality, but also I think it's a lot down to the environment that you are brought up in. You know, again, if we have an environment where you see, you know, there's a lot of role models, there is, you know, for kids, there's early opportunity to connect with industry, you know, you have access to a mentor or to a coach, and again, media and you know, manufacturers, if we look at toy manufacturers or clothing manufacturers, I mean, there's such a push for girl stuff, boy stuff, you know, astronauts, princesses, you know, I think society plays a huge role here, and also us as parents. You know, I think we need to be conscious about what toys, what stories, what movies we actually push to our kids, you know, and be aware of the impact that has. And then obviously in school, I think at middle school, when kids are between 10 and 14, is the most critical time to nurture an interest in STEM subjects and in math. And if we miss that opportunity, you know, we might lose them altogether forever. So I think it's very much about being conscious of how you nurture a young generation and what environment you create for women. You know, as I mentioned, in the space industry, less than 20% are women. And it's a huge problem. It's so big that even the United Nations has had a call to action where we create a global program to see how can we actually attract more girls into STEM education, more women into the industry, and actually help advance women. Because the industry, the success of the industry depends on it. So I think it's more, you know, as a person, you know, you're driven or you're curious, you know, follow your passion, but also make sure you are in the right environment, because that makes all the difference.
Thank you so much, ladies, for an incredibly honest and insightful panel. I think 3 quick takeaways. I think the first is that it's more conditioning versus DNA. You know, helpful to have supportive parents, schools, you know, and ecosystems. The second one is that allowing ourselves to fail, losing that fear of failure is key to stimulating creativity and innovation. And having an awesome girls club. I think, you know, we've noticed actually at She Loves Tech, and it's something which really keeps us going, is that how community and, you know, is important, especially to women entrepreneurs, and crucial to their success. But I think also finally, how do we create a more inclusive and diverse, you know, overall ecosystem, you know, for women to flourish, you know, with the support of institutions as well as men as our allies and our friends and our partners, which take us very, very nicely to our next panel about men as allies, you know, in supercharging the ecosystem for women in tech. Thank you so much, ladies.